You've got military and political expertise. How big a threat is the military and economic rise of China to our nation?
Corey, it's great to be here. It's great to see you doing this. I just thought Paul Murray had lost an extraordinary amount of weight over the last week. But it's great to see you, mate. Your point is very, very correct. And what we need to do in Australia now is, and we've seen it because of the fires and we've seen it because of COVID-19, we've seen the effect of the breakdown of the international order to a limited degree. Now, I'm not going to come out and publicly criticise China. I will make realistic statements about China. I won't talk about China in relation to war or conflict. I'll leave that to the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister and the Minister for Defence. What I will say, though, is that we are part of the Western Alliance, and the United States, as the major power in the Western Alliance, makes an assessment of China once every 2 years, and it makes an assessment which they call their national security strategy. And the biggest problem that we have is we keep focusing on China. Well, China is only one of a number of threats that are rising, according to American assessment, in the world against the Western Alliance that I value so much, against our values and our civilisation. China is part of this, and China is acting very, very aggressively, to the extent that every single day of the week, Corey, the Americans rehearse fighting China and China rehearses fighting America. Now, guess where they do it? They do it in what the Americans call the Indo-Pacific, which just happens to be our backyard. So we are in a different scenario than we have been for the last 75 years. We had better figure it out, and we'd better come to terms with it very, very fast.
Well, Jim, I happen to agree with you, but here's what the Prime Minister had to say about our current relationship with China.
Well, one thing Australia will always do is act in our national interests and never be intimidated by threats wherever they come. You know, we're a open trading nation, mate, but I'm never going to trade our values in response to coercion from wherever it comes.
OK, here's the thing, Liz Sora. You've heard what Jim Molan's had to say, and our Prime Minister. You're head of an activist organisation for regular Australians who feel they need a voice. What are they saying to you? What are your members saying to you about the concerns they have about the military and economic rise of China and our reliance on them?
Oh, mainstream Australians have been, since the pandemic, it's almost a silver lining. Everyday Aussies have had this brought to their attention loud and clear. So we've heard a lot from our supporters during this time. They've particularly been made aware of how fragile our manufacturing, or lack thereof, I should say, industry is, and how therefore that impacts upon our national sovereignty. We saw us running out of a few things, particularly pharmaceuticals during this time. We saw that in the headlines. Aussies got very, very, very worried about this. And the main cry that we got in regards to this was about the supply chain and was about bulking up our manufacturing industry. So we know that the 90s and the noughties were no boom time for manufacturing in Australia, but both decades saw a 10% increase, whereas over the last 10 years, we've seen a 5% decrease, and we desperately need to get that back up. And of course, that's going to take a lot of slashing red tape, green tape, black tape, you name it, to make it happen. But Aussies want to see a sovereign Australia, and that means being far more self-reliant and independent where we currently are. I was talking recently about the ECI with someone, and many people simply aren't aware that in the broad scheme of things, Australia on the ECI scrapes in at number 59. Now, this is an index that measures how many things a country makes, and rather the complexity of the number of things a country can make. And Australia worldwide ranks 59 between Kazakhstan and Lebanon. And that our supporters just found absolutely gobsmacking, and something that they want to see the government do something about quick time to see us become more independent from China, but more independent generally.